The night I found the pill organizer hidden behind the bathroom mirror was the night everything I had been trying to explain to myself finally made sense. The pills inside were not what my employer had been prescribed. I knew that because I had been a school nurse for 31 years, and I knew what heart medication looked like. These were not heart medication. I stood in that big, silent bathroom in the middle of a Montana ranch house worth more money than I would ever see in my lifetime, and I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Because if those pills were wrong, then his heart was not failing the way the doctors said it was. Someone was making it fail, and the only people with access to that bathroom were the two people who smiled at me every single morning over coffee. Let me start from the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. My name is Eleanor. I am 63 years old. I have brown eyes that have seen too much, hands that have been busy my whole life, and a grandson named Cooper who is the reason I am still standing. Cooper is 14. He has his father's laugh and my stubborn streak, and 8 months ago, doctors found a tumor pressing against his spinal cord. Operable, they said, but the surgery costs more than I made in 5 years of retirement combined. My daughter had no savings. Her husband had just lost his job. I sold my car. I drained what was left of my retirement account. It still was not enough. I had been working part-time at a grocery store when I saw the job posting. Live-in caregiver and personal assistant for a private patient. Room and board included. Salary listed was more than I had earned in any single year of my life. The posting said the patient was a 71-year-old man with a serious cardiac condition, expected to decline over 6 months. They needed someone with medical experience. Someone calm, discreet, and trustworthy. I told myself I was only going to the interview. His name was Robert Haley. He had built his ranch from 40 acres of inherited grassland into one of the largest private cattle operations in the state. He also owned commercial properties in 3 cities and a small regional airline. He was tall, even sitting down, white-haired, with the kind of handshake that still meant something. His doctors had given him 6 months, maybe 8 if he was careful. His heart was weakening, they said. His body was under strain. He needed consistent care and someone to manage his household and daily routine. He looked at me across the kitchen table and said, very plainly, that he needed someone who would treat him like a person and not like a problem to be managed. I told him the truth about Cooper, about the surgery, about why I needed this job. He looked at me for a long time and then he said, I appreciate honesty. It is rare in this house. I did not understand what he meant yet. But I would. Was it a comfortable arrangement? Mostly, yes. Was it something I had ever imagined for myself at 63? Absolutely not. But Cooper needed that surgery, and Robert Haley needed someone who genuinely cared whether he lived or died. So I said yes, packed 2 bags, and drove 4 hours north to the Haley Ranch. His son was 46. He lived in Seattle and visited every 2 or 3 weeks. He wore the kind of clothes that cost more than my monthly rent used to, and he had a way of entering a room like he was already in charge of it. He never asked me questions about his father's health. He asked about the estate attorney. He asked about pending property assessments. He asked, once, very casually, whether I had access to his father's financial correspondence. I said no, which was the truth. He looked at me like he did not entirely believe it. His daughter was 42. She lived only 40 minutes away and came more often. She brought flowers, always. She made Robert's evening tea herself, every single time, saying she knew exactly how he liked it. She was warm with me in a way that felt rehearsed. On my 3rd day at the ranch, she hugged me in the kitchen and said, "We are so glad you are here for Daddy." The way she said it made me feel like I had just been informed of something. Robert's health did seem to be declining. Slowly, then faster. His energy dropped week by week. His appetite fell. His color was not right. The cardiologist came twice a month and adjusted his medication each time, looking more and more concerned at the results. His body is not responding the way we hoped, the doctor told me. We are doing everything we can. I believed that. I had no reason not to. But there were small things. The kind of things you only notice if you have spent decades paying attention to the gap between what people say and what they actually mean. His daughter always dismissed the housekeeper on the mornings she came to visit. She said she wanted private family time. The housekeeper, a quiet woman named Ruth who had worked at the ranch for 9 years, told me once, very carefully, that things had changed since Miss Haley started coming around more often. I asked what she meant. She looked at the door. She said, "Just that things have changed." One evening, I overheard his son on a phone call in the hallway outside Robert's study. He said, "The timeline needs to move faster. We cannot wait for the natural process." I stopped walking. I stood very still. I told myself it was probably about a business deal, but the words stayed with me. 3 weeks into my time at the ranch, I noticed something in the way Robert reacted to his evening tea. He was always worse the mornings after he drank it. His hands shook more. His words came slower. His daughter made that tea every single time she visited, and she visited 3 or 4 times a week. I started keeping a private log. Dates, times, symptoms. What he ate. What he drank. Who had been in the house. The pattern was there in black and white inside 2 weeks. And then came the night of the pill organizer. I had gone into his bathroom to restock his morning medications. I opened the medicine cabinet and noticed the organizer had been moved. It was sitting slightly crooked on the second shelf, which it never was, because Robert was meticulous about the way things were arranged. I picked it up. The pills for Thursday evening did not match what the cardiologist had prescribed. I recognized the coating, the shape. I had seen this drug before during my nursing years. It was a blood pressure medication, but a very specific kind, and in someone with Robert's cardiac condition, it could cause dangerous rhythm disruptions over time. Exactly the kind of deterioration his doctors had been documenting. I put the organizer down very slowly. My hands were shaking, but I made them stop. I thought about Cooper. I thought about the surgery scheduled for 3 months from now. I thought about what would happen if I said the wrong thing to the wrong person before I had proof. And then I heard footsteps in the hallway outside the bedroom. I turned off the bathroom light and waited. The door to the bedroom opened. I heard his daughter's voice. She was humming to herself, very quietly, the way people do when they think they are completely alone. I heard the soft sound of something being set down near the nightstand. Then silence. Then footsteps receding. Then the hallway door closing. I waited 5 full minutes before I moved. On the nightstand beside Robert's bed, there was a small glass of water and 2 pills. Not in the organizer. Loose. I photographed them with my phone before I moved them. I replaced them with 2 correct pills from the prescription bottle in the cabinet. That night, Robert slept without waking once. His breathing was the steadiest I had heard since my first week at the ranch. In the morning, I told him I needed to speak with him privately. He looked at my face and nodded once. I shut the door and I told him everything. The pill organizer, the tea pattern, the phone call I had overheard, the log I had been keeping. I did not soften it. I did not hedge. I had spent 31 years telling parents the honest truth about their children's health, and I had learned that vague kindness helps no one. He sat very still while I talked. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I have been afraid to say this out loud for 2 months." My chest tightened. "You suspected?" He looked out the window at the open land. His son had been pressuring him for 8 months to sign a restructured ownership agreement. His daughter had begun managing his calendar, redirecting his calls, limiting his contact with his longtime accountant and attorney. He had believed it was concern. Grief, in advance, maybe. He said he told himself that children respond to a parent's illness in difficult ways. But then he said, quietly, the word that broke something open in the room. He said, "The week before my diagnosis, I was healthy. The annual physical showed nothing alarming. Then a sudden event. Hospitalization. And then the diagnosis." He looked at me. "It moved very fast." I said, "Who managed your care in the hospital?" His son had arrived on the 2nd day and taken over communications with the medical team. He had power of attorney, drafted 2 months before that hospitalization, during a period when Robert had been traveling frequently, and his son had said it was just practical, just in case something happened while you were away. I felt cold. I said very clearly, "Robert, you need to call your personal attorney today, not through your son, directly." He looked at me. "Do you think they would actually?" I said, "I think we cannot afford to assume they would not. If you are listening right now and you are wondering what you would do in this situation, if you would speak up or stay quiet, I want you to tell me in the comments. Because in that moment, speaking up felt like the most dangerous thing I had ever done, and staying quiet felt impossible." His attorney was a man named Gerald, who had worked with the Haley family for 22 years. Robert called him from my cell phone. because he believed his own phone was being monitored. I do not know if that was true, but I did not tell him it was unlikely, because by that point, I did not know what was unlikely anymore. Gerald arrived the following afternoon. He was in his late 60s, methodical, with the kind of quiet authority that does not need to announce itself. Robert's son was not at the ranch that day. His daughter arrived an hour after Gerald did, flowers in hand, and stopped in the doorway of the sitting room when she saw us. Her face went through 3 expressions in about 1 second. She chose the 4th one, which was pleasant and composed. "This is a surprise," she said. Gerald looked at her steadily. "Your father wanted to review some documents." She set the flowers down on the table. "Of course. Is there anything I can help with?" Robert looked at her from across the room. He said, "I think I can manage my own affairs for one afternoon." Something shifted in her expression. Just slightly. She smiled again and said she would start the tea. I said, very calmly, that I had already put the kettle on and that she should sit down. She looked at me. The smile stayed, but her eyes did not. Gerald spent 3 hours with Robert that afternoon. I stayed in the adjacent room. When his daughter tried twice to enter the sitting room, I gently redirected her. When she asked what was being discussed, I said Robert would let her know when he was ready. By the time his son called, clearly having been contacted by his sister, Gerald had already finished reviewing the power of attorney documents and identified irregularities. The signature on one of the addendums did not match Robert's other signatures from the same period. It had been added after the original signing. Gerald said this plainly, without drama, the way people say things they have been professionally trained to say without flinching. Robert said nothing for a long time. Gerald said he would be contacting the state medical board regarding the medication questions and that he recommended law enforcement be notified about the potential medical interference. His son arrived at the ranch within 90 minutes of that phone call. He walked in the front door and looked at me standing in the hallway and said, "What exactly do you think you are doing?" I said, "My job." He walked past me. I heard raised voices behind the closed door of the sitting room, then his voice alone for a while, steady and controlled. Then Gerald's voice, very brief, very flat, then silence. When the door opened, his son's face looked different. It looked like a man who had just realized something he had been sure would hold had given way beneath him. His daughter was in the kitchen. I had not left the hallway. That evening, after Gerald had gone, and after both of Robert's children had left, Robert came and sat across from me in the kitchen. He looked exhausted. Not the exhaustion of illness, the exhaustion of grief, of finding out that a fear you spent months trying to talk yourself out of was real. He said, "I want to know something." I waited. He said, "You needed this job. You could have said nothing and let things proceed. Why didn't you?" I thought about Cooper. I thought about the surgery and the money and how desperately I had needed this position when I walked through the door. And I said, "Because staying silent would have made me part of it, and I could not live with that." He nodded slowly. He said, "Neither can I." Over the next 2 weeks, Gerald worked with an independent physician to review Robert's full medical history from the 18 months preceding his diagnosis. The cardiologist, it turned out, had been receiving referrals exclusively through his son's healthcare consulting network. He was not corrupt. He was simply working from the information he had been given, and the information he had been given had been selectively curated by someone who understood which tests to request and which to obscure. The independent physician found that Robert's underlying cardiac issue was real but mild, manageable. The severe deterioration documented over the past 8 months had been accelerated by medication substitution, by a compound added to his evening tea, and by a sustained pattern of isolation and stress that the independent physician described, in her written report, as consistent with deliberate psychological pressure. When the investigators tested the tea blend his daughter kept stored in the kitchen, the one she said she prepared specially, from a recipe, just for Daddy, they found traces of a botanical compound that in repeated small doses could suppress cardiac function in an already vulnerable system. Available online. Legal to purchase. Detectable only if you knew to look for it. His daughter broke down in the living room of her home when investigators confronted her. I was not there. I only know what Gerald told me afterward. She said she had not meant for it to go this far. She had only wanted things to move along naturally. She said her brother had told her it was harmless, that it would simply let the illness do what it was already going to do, that no one would be hurt by something that was already inevitable. The investigators asked whether she believed that. Gerald said she did not answer. His son did not break down. His son called 3 attorneys in 40 minutes and said very little after that. He was composed and careful, which I imagine had served him well for a long time. It did not serve him here. The charges took several weeks to formalize: conspiracy, fraud, medical interference causing bodily harm. His son faced additional charges related to the falsified power of attorney documents. His daughter faced charges related to the poisoning. They were both released on bond while their cases proceeded, but they were removed from any role in Robert's affairs, medical or financial, effective immediately. The morning after the charges were filed, Robert came downstairs for breakfast for the first time in weeks. He sat at the kitchen table and drank his coffee and looked out at the land. He said, "The grass needs attention on the north pasture." I said, "I will let the ranch hands know." He said, "Thank you, Eleanor." I said, "You are welcome." It was not dramatic. It was not a scene from a movie. It was just a man sitting at his own kitchen table in his own house, drinking his own coffee, making his own small plans for the day. But after everything, it felt enormous. His recovery was gradual. The independent physician managed his actual condition, which responded well to the correct medication and the absence of whatever had been added to his tea. Within 6 weeks, his energy had improved substantially. Within 3 months, the cardiologist who had originally treated him revised his prognosis severely. Robert spent those months doing something he said he had been putting off for years. He established a foundation, funded through a portion of the ranch's operating profits, to provide medical financial assistance to families in Montana who could not cover the costs of critical surgeries and treatments. Cooper was not the first recipient, but he was among the first. The morning I got the call that Cooper's surgery had been approved and fully covered, I was standing in the kitchen at the ranch making breakfast. I set the phone down on the counter, and I stood there for a moment just breathing. Robert walked in. He looked at my face and he said, "Good news?" I said, "The best." He nodded. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. My daughter called me that evening. She cried for a long time. She said, "Mom, how did you do this?" I said, "I just did not look away when I should have." She said, "That sounds like you." Cooper had his surgery 11 weeks later at a hospital in Denver. The tumor was removed cleanly. The surgeon said his recovery prognosis was excellent. He would need physical therapy. He would need time. But he would walk, run, live his life. The afternoon we brought him home from the hospital, he held my hand in the back seat of the car and fell asleep leaning against my shoulder. He is 14 and taller than me, and he still does that when he is tired. I looked out the window at the highway and I thought about the night I stood in that bathroom holding that pill organizer, shaking, wondering whether to say something. I think about that moment a lot, because it would have been so easy to put the organizer back, to tell myself I was wrong, to remind myself of what I stood to lose if I caused trouble. I needed that job. I needed that salary. I needed to stay. But staying quiet is a choice too. And choices have weight. His son and daughter both entered plea agreements 6 months later. The legal proceedings were long, and I will not pretend they were satisfying in the way that resolution looks in stories. Real justice is slower and messier and leaves more questions unanswered than you expect. But they were held accountable, and Robert was alive to see it. His daughter wrote him a letter from her court-mandated counseling program. He showed it to me one evening. She wrote that she had spent so many years feeling like the ranch and the money were the only proof that her father had ever valued her, that when she believed those things were going to be redirected, she had felt something close to erasure. She wrote that she understood this did not justify what she had done. She wrote that she was sorry. Robert folded the letter carefully. He said, "I think I failed them long before they failed me." I did not agree with that, but I understood why he needed to say it. I stayed at the ranch through the end of that year. Then I stayed another 6 months because Robert asked me to, and because I had nowhere urgent to be, and because the work mattered. Eventually I returned to Ohio. I see Cooper on weekends. He is doing well. He plays basketball again, badly and enthusiastically, which is about the best outcome I could have imagined. Robert and I speak by phone every week or two. He is doing well. He rides his horses in the morning when the weather allows it. He is slower than he was, but he is there, which is the whole point. I have been asked, since all of this, whether I was afraid. Yes. Every single day of it. I have been asked whether I would do it again. Without hesitation, the thing I want you to take from this is not a lesson about billionaires or ranch houses or complicated families and their money. Those things are details. The core of it is something much simpler. There are moments in life when you see something wrong, and you have to decide whether you are willing to live with yourself if you say nothing. I have seen people say nothing. I have done it myself, in smaller situations, in earlier years, and I know what that weight feels like. It does not get lighter. Speaking up when it costs you something is the only kind of speaking up that matters. I am 63 years old. I have been a nurse, a mother, a grandmother, a caregiver, and apparently once, something like a detective. I did not expect the last one, but I have learned that life rarely asks you for what you expect to give. It asks for what you actually have. And what I had, in that bathroom in Montana on that particular night, was 31 years of knowing when something was wrong and refusing to pretend otherwise. That was enough. If this story moved you, if you found yourself thinking about what you would have done in my place, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell me your name. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what you would have done. And if you believe that the truth is always worth the cost, hit subscribe, because I have more stories to tell. And every one of them is about what happens when ordinary people refuse to look away.